Many people dream of launching their own fashion brands, but once they get started, find that it's much more complicated than it looks. That leads to stalled or even failed businesses. Brilliantly creative products that could be part of profitable companies end up dying on the vine, never making it beyond the sample room. If you're thinking of starting a fashion brand, or if you have a brand and you're stuck trying to grow it, then this podcast could bring you some of the answers you're looking for. I'm Jane Singer, and thank you for joining me on A Seat at the Table. This episode is part of our Launch to Legendary series, where we get to hear from entrepreneurs and innovators who have taken the ordinary and turned it into the extraordinary, who have built their businesses by seeing opportunities in oftentimes inopportune circumstances, who've defined success in their own terms. Together, we'll be able to learn from their experiences and be inspired by what they've achieved. In today's podcast episode, we'll be hearing how Susan Berman started an accessories business while she was in business school and grew it into a brand that retailers from Barney's to Anthropologie loved. Her Susan Daniels brand was so eye-catching that it won that all-important placement in store windows, as well as being worn by cast members of popular television series, including Gossip Girls. Susan talks about what she wishes she knew when she got started, what were the biggest blind spots she faced, and what she'd do differently if she were starting over today. Before we get started, whether you're launching a new brand or looking to grow your existing brand, then Spin Expo is a must-visit fair. It's the primary exhibition for yarns and knitwear. The fair is a rich resource featuring well-edited, high-quality collections as well as cutting-edge technical innovation, not to mention outstanding trend information that cannot be found anywhere else. You can learn more at spinexpo.com. That's www.spinexpo.com. There's also a link in the show notes. And check out our website. You can find all of the previous episodes of A Seat at the Table, the show notes, news about our upcoming masterclass series, and lots of other useful information. You can find it at seat.fm. That's www.seat.fm. Now let's dive in as Susan talks about starting and growing a successful brand. You said you were in business school at the time when you started your business. Did that help you with knowing how to run your business, or was actually operating the business, on a day-to-day basis? Was that vastly different than anything you learned in business school?
Well, when I went to business school, they were not very entrepreneur friendly. I went to Columbia Business School, which was an amazing place, and I learned, and I think it helped me feel a lot more comfortable with numbers because I'm not naturally a numbers person, and I think that it helped me with that. But they were not, I was kind of an anomaly. I was a creative entrepreneur in a mix of bankers and investment and consultants. So, and at the time, there were not a lot of entrepreneur programs. So I think I really learned when I was doing what I was doing. Although I'm not going to say that business school probably gave me a foundation, which I might not have felt as comfortable as I did had I not gone there.
Right. But it was really, in other words, it's critical to be able to learn on the job.
Yes, I think every day I learned something new. And it was, again, I had no background in any of this. This was just, I loved designing, but I was designing by drawing on pieces of paper and cutting up fabric and bringing it to my factories. I wasn't doing digital design. I had no design background. And so I learned as I went along.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I think in so many professions, it's not that formal education isn't important, because it is, of course, but I think when people come out of school, they underestimate how much you have to learn by just having your hands in the clay.
Right. I completely agree, because things come up that nobody, you can read case studies, but it's not your case study. And things that come up for you are going to be different than come up for somebody else. And I think that you need to just get in it to really be able to learn it and figure out how to run it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So let me just cycle back now to the beginning. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about how you got started in this business, what your brand was about, and how you decided to launch it and what you did to get it going.
So I was an editor at Food and Wine magazine, and I had just gotten into business school, and I had gone to Bloomingdale's, and headbands were really expensive. I didn't make a lot of money back then, and I came up with an idea to make my own headband and put snaps on it and make these really pretty silk flowers. So I made these flowers. I made my own headbands, and people started saying, "That's so pretty. Where did you get it?" And I said to my husband, "I'm starting a company." He looked at me like I had lost my mind. I came up with a name, which was Multiband, which because you could change the ornaments. And I started going to stores, and I started getting orders. And the first store I went to was a small boutique on Madison Avenue, and they wanted to put me in the window.
Wow.
So I that kind of fueled me to keep going. And I started going to open sea days. Back then, all the department stores had open sea days where they would see new designers and give you a chance to show your products. So I went to Barney's and Henry Bendel's and Bonwit Teller at the time, and I think Bloomingdale's and Saks. I went to as many as I could go to. I waited online. I got 2 seconds with the buyers, but I got myself into several of the stores. And when I graduated from business school, I got a very big order from Barney's. So I decided that this was something I had to try, and I was going to move forward with it.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, how many people graduate right from business school with a business that's up and running and is getting huge orders from important retailers?
It was amazing. It was very exciting for me, and also something new and different. And I really had to learn as I went along, because I had no formal design training, and I certainly didn't really know how to run my own business.
Right, right. But you did, and you succeeded, which is so impressive. And as you've gone through the whole process and you're looking back at it now, what were the blind spots, the things that you never anticipated when you entered the business, but that actually became critical when you were running the business?
So I think the most important thing was probably how difficult manufacturing and quality control could be. Finding manufacturers who could make what I needed to be made. I made leather headbands. I made silk headbands. I started making scarves and other products, and I needed different factories to make different things. And I needed to know that they would do a good job. And when they were making 10,000 units, I needed to know that the quality was going to be there. And so that was a really big issue for me. And that was not my favorite part of the business. So that was definitely something I did not anticipate. Also, I think just getting stuck in a bubble and being stuck in the day-to-day work of just making sure that every order got out the door took so much time that I didn't always have time to see the big picture and to figure out. I started a kids linen line, which was beautiful, but I didn't have time to grow it. And I started a bag line, but I didn't have time to grow it. So I think that I got stuck in the nitty-gritty and wasn't able to spend the time doing the things that I probably would have loved to do more.
Right. I think a lot of people face that. When you're the owner of the business, it becomes very difficult to sort of pull back from certain things. And I think that it's a credit to you that you cared so much about the quality that you wanted to see everything before you shipped it.
Yeah, it was a good thing and a bad thing. I think I probably should have, after a while, been able to just let my factories ticket and ship, and maybe I would go I should have set up something where I checked every 100 units and saw, 10 pieces every 100 units or something. There were definitely ways of doing it better than I did
it. Right. Yeah. And certainly the quality assurance side of things is more complex than most people anticipate.
Yes, it definitely is. And also you have to know your buyers. You have to know your stores. If you're selling to Target, you're not going to be worried about the same qualities if you're selling to an upscale department store in Japan. So it's just different. And I knew my buyers, so I kind of knew what I was up against for a different order. but I also would never have let anything ship out of my office that wasn't perfect in my mind, because that was a representation of me. So that was part of it as well.
Yeah, for sure. Where were you actually having these things manufactured?
So I had all my factories were in the New York area. I had one woman who worked out of her brownstone on the Upper West Side, which was amazing. I hired a lot of women who sewed out of their homes. I made these beautiful patchwork scarves, and they were complex to make because you were sewing different weights of fabric together, and people really had to know how to do it. So I employed a lot of women who sewed out of their homes. I had a factory in the Bronx for a long time. I had a leather factory in the garment district. So I kind of had factories a little bit all over the place. And then I had a factory in Florida for a little while and one in the Midwest for a little while, depending on what I needed.
Right. So you were able to source everything domestically.
Yes. And later on, when some of the stores really wanted low prices, I started looking into sourcing things overseas. And I just didn't feel that I had the control over it. And I also, at the time, they couldn't even get the prices to what I needed them to be. So it wasn't something I wanted to do.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean it's not easy to manage all of it, and it looks easy, but when you actually come down to doing it, there's a lot of moving parts.
Yes, there definitely are.
Yeah. What do you feel that most startups either misunderstand or maybe don't understand about running a fashion company? And by a fashion company, I mean a company that's selling a branded product, not someone who's manufacturing fashion.
Well, some of the things that I learned along the way, and I've been sharing with some of the small business owners that I've been working with, don't offer too many SKUs. I offered so many. My line was huge, and my sales rep wanted me to do more and more. And I listened, and I realized at the end, this is insane. I can't make. There's no reason to stock this much fabric and give this many choices. So one thing that I would say is really be careful and really limit what you offer. Be good at what you offer, but be kind of lean about it instead of offering too much. Because if they like your product, they'll buy it. And if they want something else, the buyers will tell you they want something else, and you'll go and find other sources, other fabrics, or whatever they look for. I worked with a lot of stores that would come up with, we need a headscarf that looks like this. Can you make it? And I would make it for them. So, if buyers want something you don't have, they'll tell you if you have a relationship with them. And also, I would suggest that you hire somebody to do your marketing and don't get yourself stuck doing it. I was lucky that my sales rep had, all the marketing people came to them. So I was in lots of magazines. I was on Gossip Girl and things like that. But I think when you're starting a fashion brand, you really need to look at what's out there to make sure that you are unique and different, and to really establish relationships with your buyers. Because for me, that was the most amazing part, that I had relationships with my Henry Bendel's buyer and my Anthropologie buyer and my Ann Taylor buyer. And we worked together to create lines that were great. And to me, that was the most rewarding part of doing my business.
Right. So the creative side of it is really the sweet spot. We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree. Some are going to hear this and think, you TDP. But hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
Right. For me, and I have to believe that most people who are starting fashion brands, that they have the creative part is probably to them the more important part. And they have to be careful not to get caught up where manufacturing takes all their time and that they don't get to do what they want to do. because then it becomes more of a chore than something that's fun.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that many people who own and run businesses would agree with you on that, that it looked like it was going to be fun, and it was in the very early years. And then it gets to the point where other people are doing all the fun stuff and you're doing all the stuff nobody else wants to do or can do.
Right, exactly. And the other thing is really don't feel like you have to control everything, because there are people who can help, and you can oversee them and make sure that they're doing things the way you want them to do it. But don't be afraid to give up some control, because in the end, that's going to free you up to do what you want to do and to grow your business ultimately.
That's an important point. It's difficult for people, whether it's a small business or a large business. You feel that sense of responsibility, right, to your customers. You feel that concern because, obviously you bear the ultimate responsibility. So it is very difficult to let go a bit. But you're right. You absolutely have to, at some point, be able to let other people take some responsibility or ownership, if you will.
Right. And another thing that I would have loved to have was a group of other small business owners to talk to and share issues with. I had sales reps, but the sales reps, although I was very close to them, they really cared about my getting the orders out. So if I couldn't get a fabric, they weren't the person for me to say, oh my God, the fabric isn't there. What am I going to do? And my factories weren't the people to go tell that to. So it really would have been helpful to have a group of other small business owners. In fact, I love doing trade shows, because that's where I got to talk to other small business owners and know that, if they were a jewelry designer, they had the same issues I had. If they were a bag designer, they still had the same issues I had. So it was very comforting to have other people to talk to. And that's something I really think is important for small businesses today, is really find a group that you can confide in and who'll help you get through the hard parts.
That's so true. And I think that so many people feel as you do. It's very isolating. People think of it that it's your own business. You can do whatever you want. You're the boss. But they forget that there's a lot of downsides. There's a lot of times when you don't know what to do, or you feel like everything's going to smash, and you need to have somebody else who's been there, whether it's to cheer you on or to give you advice. You need that. It's critical.
Right. And, you have I had my family, but their favorite saying was shut up and ship it. So, they didn't feel the anxiety and the stress that I felt about everything. So it definitely is good to surround yourself with people who are doing similar things, who will understand your pain points. When your fabric is stuck on a camel in the middle of India and nobody cares that it's not going to get there, but you have to get it there. I had that happen several times.
Oh my gosh.
Or, your fabric's stuck on a boat somewhere and it's not going to be there because it's delayed 3 weeks. Well, then your orders are canceled. And what do you do? So there's lots of moving parts when you're running a fashion business.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of high highs and low lows.
Yes, exactly. And then, there are times when the orders are going to come pouring in, and there are times when it's going to be slower, because that's how the market rolls. And that's another thing. And the other thing is really be proactive, because if headbands were out, which happens, headbands for me, I started designing headbands and they're cyclical, headbands go in and they go out. And then I started designing scarves so that filled in. So really you have to be proactive and really figure out how to keep changing with what the needs of buyers, because otherwise you're going to spend a year out because nobody wants headbands.
I think that's true. I think people oftentimes get so caught up when things are at a high that they forget, like you said, it's cyclical. And have you thought about what happens, right, to get you through the lows?
Right. And it's very emotional, because there were days when the fax machine wouldn't stop. At that time, my orders came through a fax machine, wouldn't stop sending orders. And then there were days when nothing would come through. And you have to really be able to deal with, as you said, the highs and the lows, and knowing that, you're just going to keep up with the trends and you're going to keep up with what's in and what's not in. And you have buyers, hopefully, who will tell you what they need and going forward so that you can keep changing. And you just can't stay stagnant because you're not going to get as far as if you're really flexible and open to change and another thing is, you can't feel criticized. It's very hard to be a creative person and you design something. I remember designing lines and sending them to my showroom and holding my breath, wondering what were their comments going to be. And you can't take it too personally, because if they wanted me to change something, I needed to know that it wasn't a personal affront, but that they knew more about what the buyers wanted, and that if I had to tweak something, it was for everybody's own good, not just because they were being critical.
That's a good point. And it's very difficult when it's your personal creation, right? That someone's then picking it apart.
Right.
But like you said, yeah, you have to have a thick skin.
Right. I did one trade show and I did a lot of these just plain silk scarves. And one buyer came in and said, "Why would I buy this? It's just a slab of fabric." I was like, okay. So, you just have to just kind of brush it off and say, okay, well, then don't buy it and you can go buy from somebody else.
Right.
So,
right.
You never quite know what people are going to say. So.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I guess, like you said, you just have to roll with it, and everyone isn't going to like what you do. And if everyone did like it, it probably wouldn't be anything too special.
Right. Exactly. And you start making relationships with the buyers who, appreciate you. And then you have people on your side.
Yeah. You find your tribe and you find the ones who like you, and then that's your market.
Right. Exactly.
So if you were starting a fashion brand from scratch today, what would you do differently? Or what would be what would you do differently?
Knowing what I know from
starting. Yes, knowing what you know, taking everything you know.
So I think, number one, what I said before, I would not offer as many choices. I would start much leaner, and I would probably try to do a lot of private label, because that's what I really enjoyed. And that's where you get larger quantities and bigger orders. And I loved working with small stores, but making 2 pieces per color per item was hard on my factories. So I think I maybe would focus more on private label and the larger orders. I would also get help. I would hire somebody to do my marketing. I would do drop ship with my factories. I'd make sure I set that up so everything didn't have to come through my office, and I'd have to just trust that it would, I would obviously do quality control, but I'd have to put more trust in the people who were working for me. And I think I would also surround myself with people who were support systems in other businesses. And I think one thing that I didn't do as much, I did it once or twice, but really try to collaborate with other small businesses, because I think that these days small businesses are rare, the ones that are succeeding. And I think it's important to work together. I worked at one point with a woman who painted velvet fabric, and we were putting together scarves for a big store in the city. And that was great. It was really fun. So I think collaborations are something that I would probably do more of if I could.
That's such a great idea. And I think, you can see big brands are doing collaborations, and they're doing it obviously with artists or with musicians or with anybody else who has something that's creative to bring to the table that's a little bit different than what they're doing. So I think that it's a concept that small brands don't really think about, right? And like you said, it's so important because you can combine your strengths and create something that's even bigger and stronger.
Right, exactly. And as I said, I work with a lot of small businesses now doing consulting, and I really try to encourage them to do collaborations, whether it's for marketing or for product development or for anything, because I think that when you work together, you become stronger. And I think that's something that people forget about. They run right to placing Google ads because they think that's how they're going to get sales. And I don't believe although that's part of it these days, I do think that collaborating and working with people who can help you boost your sales, and you can help them, is part of the mix. So
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you mentioned that you're helping a lot of brands who are getting started. Can you share a little bit what you're doing these days, what you're working on?
sure. So I'm working on a small business consulting company called The Collaboratory. And what we do is we work one-on-one with small business owners. I have a partner named May Cowan, and we work together with small business owners, helping them do branding and strategy and some financial work if that's what they want. But we focus a lot on really their brand strategies. They're looking at customer insights, looking at their competition, and really looking at who they are, who are they targeting, and how are they going to increase their sales and their clients. We're also running these small peer advisory groups where we're getting small businesses together to talk and collaborate and create a safe space for them to share their wins and their losses, and hopefully through that they'll be able to really feel that they have a support network that they can come to, which is something that I didn't have. And I feel really strongly that that's something that small businesses will really help them move forward, because it's amazing what people share when they're together in a group like that, and the ideas that come together with 5 small business owners collaborating together, even if they're different businesses.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can learn a lot from somebody, even if they're not doing exactly what you're doing.
Right, exactly. And I also volunteer for a nonprofit called the Acceleration Project, which works with small business owners. And I've loved doing that. And I work with all different small business owners. Even, I've worked with a lighting designer and an engineer and people totally outside of my scope. But I'm finding that because I know what I know from running my business, it really works for everybody. It's not always industry specific. Once you've started and run your own business, you can kind of generalize to help people in any business. So, which has been really interesting and rewarding for me to realize that.
So where can people find you, Susan? Is it best for people to just try to connect with you on LinkedIn?
Yes, that's perfect. Through Susan Berman.
Okay, well, I'll make sure to put the links in the show notes for this episode. And I thank you so much, Susan, for joining me today, for sharing so many insights. I've learned a lot and gotten a lot of inspiration from talking to you. So I'm sure that everybody listening to this probably has too.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jane.
If you enjoyed this episode of A Seat at the Table, join me each week when I sit down with leading executives, entrepreneurs, educators, and authors who share their insights, experiences, and vision for the future of business. And make sure you visit Spin Expo. From trend information to technical innovation, Spin Expo is the primary exhibition for yarns and knitwear. The fair provides well-edited forums featuring high-quality products that are bursting with creativity. To learn more, go to spinexpo.com. That's www.spinexpo.com. You can also find a link in the show notes for this episode. And don't forget to check out our podcast website, where you can find all of the previous episodes of A Seat at the Table, the show notes, news about our upcoming masterclass series, and lots of other useful information. You can find it at seat.fm. That's www.seat.fm. FM because it's a podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Jane Singer, and I'll see you in the next podcast episode.